Hi, this is Dave Bundy. I'm editor of the Journal Star, and this is our editorial board interview with Russ Barger, who is a legislative candidate for District 26. So, Russ, thanks a bunch for making time for us. It appears you're a very busy person and talking to us from a car, always on the go. Kent, you look very not busy right now, but why don't you introduce yourself anyway?
I'm Kent Walgamot. I write about arts and entertainment. I've been on the editorial board for 12 years, and I'm here in my very professional band t-shirt from the band I saw last night. Yeah, I'm not exactly real busy.
Well, you're busy other times. So, all right. Well, Russ, again, thanks a ton for joining us. We will start with a question that sort of allows you to introduce yourself to voters. The legislature, we've all been watching it. At times it has not looked fun, and yet you're working very hard to be elected and to serve there. So why do you want to be in the legislature, and what experiences and what character traits do you have that suit you to being in the legislature?
Well, thanks for interviewing me today. I apologize for taking so long to get this set up. It's just been really busy. We're running up to, the primary, and with all of these absentee ballots going out, we've just been trying to keep running. Well, I must tell you that the $12,000 a year salary was tremendously attractive to me. That was, of course, one of the reasons I wanted to jump in.
The editorial board thinks you should get more for being in the legislature.
I think almost everyone does. Everyone but those guys in the state house.
Yeah.
So that was not actually the reason. From what I've seen over the last several years, it just seems like the trajectory of our state and our part of the city are just not going the direction that I wanted them to. And I've been kicking around doing this for a while. I got some prodding from the governor actually to go ahead and jump in the race. But I think that being a longtime resident in that part of town, we've been in Northeast Lincoln for 20 some years, whether it was going to undergrad on East Campus or going to law school on East Campus. And then, of course, I went out and practiced law for a while in central Nebraska, and then came back and worked for the AG's office, got married. Got married at St. John's in Northeast Lincoln. We've lived either over by Gateway or over by St. John's, all but about 3 years since '99. So we've been around for a while. Not as long as L. Kent Walgamot, of course. He's been around way longer than that. But so I've had a lot of experience with state government, either as an assistant attorney general or in the Department of Labor. We also have some outside business ventures that I've been involved in. They almost always include ag because I grew up out by McCook. Still have some farming interests out there, and several partners. And I have a drone company that's devoted to cattle producers, mostly feed yards and cow-calf guys. So it's been kind of fun watching the Silicon Prairie form, because Lincoln is actually an important corner of that. I don't know if most people realize that there's a little tech hub that exists here. Maybe not as great as Kansas City, but I would say it's better than Des Moines or Omaha has. And Huddle has done. They've been an important part of that, but that's one thing I'll credit the city leaders and the state is they've tried to make this more of a tech hub. I think they'd like to have it like Austin. I don't know if we'll get there, but we'll give it a shot.
All right. So first issue-oriented question. We've had, with the State Board of Education, with public health issues, there's been some tension at times between local control and state control. How do you navigate that? Where would you what would be your priorities in figuring out when state control ought to be taking precedent.
Well, and it's strange because I don't think anyone anticipated the genesis of how we got into this strange situation where Lincoln was sort of separate from the purview of the state HHS. I think there was an old set of statutes and they created the health boards. Oh Lord, it's been decades ago. And Douglas County it fell into the same system as all the other health boards. But since Lancaster and Lincoln were a combined unit, the subdivisions are considered the same, then they kept their old statute. And oddly enough, COVID showed that to be a problem, apparently. The way I look at it is if, for instance, you're in a unique situation where your political subdivision has some unique health problems. Let me say it was a really old population, or I don't know, you had a whole bunch of medical centers or research centers where you really could show that you were at a higher risk from some kind of pathogen. I could see where local control maybe should hold sway, but the state, though, has a larger amount of data, and I'd say a larger number of experts. I mean, HHS has a whole group on public health. Even Lincoln and Omaha don't have the expertise or the budget to handle that. So I think you should defer to the state's interpretation on things unless you have a pretty strong showing on some scientific basis that shows you're unique from your adjacent counties. I think, does that answer your question?
That addresses the public health issue, but there are also, there are issues with education. There are issues with land use. Are you a proponent?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you're talking about far more than the pandemic. You're talking about things, I suppose, like zoning, or whether it's like we don't have a learning community here like Omaha. I mean, it's pretty much just LPS in our district. Let me address the land use part. I'm more inclined for local control in that situation. I mean, our system is built somewhat on subsidiarity, where if you can make the decision at a more local level, and it's not necessarily going to harm someone in an adjacent county, you should let them make that choice. Like there's some counties that are livestock friendly, some aren't. And they make that choice. Lancaster's probably never going to be. Do I think that the state should be coming in and overriding some of those local decisions? I would say generally not. And if it's something where it's going to require some kind of regional system, part of the problem is I think when you start putting in, for instance, wind or solar, things like that, you're going to have some agreements with OPPD or MPPD, and it's going to be more than a county-wide system. So, I'd have to look at the details of each one, but I would defer to the local level decision-making when it comes to land use planning. I mean, and I don't think the state really gets that involved when it comes to, city planning, things like that, unless it's something that's way out of the general engineering norms.
Okay. So another issue that's a big one in the legislature and did not necessarily get addressed was corrections. What would be your priorities? Where do you think solutions lie in solving prison overcrowding and our corrections crisis?
Yeah, that's going to have to be a multifaceted approach. I don't think there's no silver bullet there. I think it's probably inevitable that we're either going to have to either significantly upgrade the state pen and possibly Tecumseh. And it may just be that we're going to have one whole new prison. It's more probably a matter of when, not if. But you have to combine that with some other type of pre-trial diversion programs. I think that there's systems in place. I think the Supreme Court's been trying things. I think Lancaster County's been trying things. I think Douglas has some ideas that allow for diversion. And of course, trying to find ways to keep those non-violent ones from being in what you would consider a pure penal system. I mean, they do have the work camp out in McCook. I don't know if I call that a raving success, but maybe we ought to be examining other ways to move some of those lower offenses to a lower security type facility to reduce costs. And that would result in savings across the board. I mean, you're going to have to try multiple sets of those things. I would hope that perhaps Frakes would want to have some additional studies to figure out where there's some low-hanging fruit and some ideas from some national group. I haven't looked to see if there's been any legislative resolution on another study, or if that corrections has even suggested that. But we need something that's more global rather than us just looking at each silo and thinking we have the answer.
Okay, so tax reform is another thing. We've gotten, there were tax cuts passed. In your mind, is that all that's necessary, or what still needs attention regarding our state system of taxation? And if we need more cuts, where's the money come from?
How long do you want me to talk about this stuff?
Well, we got, the clock is ticking. You got 15 or something. You don't have to solve it all.
All right.
Just maybe a little hint of a direction.
There's things I know and things I think I know. I'm just going to steal that from Steve Sipple right now.
Fair enough.
I know that I don't understand. I have the broad strokes of whatever the school aid formula is. And I know I do not understand the TIOSA part of it at all. I mean,
no one does.
Yes, I think there's like 6 people in the whole state that understand it, and it's not any of us. So the school funding is the major driver, of course, on our property taxes. We have a significantly higher property tax burden than a vast majority of the states. I think most states are in the 20s. I'd say the more conservative states are probably in the low 20s. The more progressive ones are probably in around 30-ish. So we've got a problem with that. I think that the governor and the legislature in general is kind of surprised that both sides of the aisle seem to be willing to work towards some of these rebates. I think if there were some ways to find if there were any fat to be cut, would be to not base things purely on budgets, because most government agencies are going to spend whatever money they have. I don't know that government agencies ever really operate on metrics or goals quite like a business did. I mean, if you don't make a certain number of products or sell a certain amount of things or provide a certain amount of service in some of your product lines, you need to fix that or eliminate it. It's not quite that simple with government, but we don't really have metrics of success. We just figure out budgets. I'm no expert on what this is going to take. I do wish there were an answer as to why we seem to spend so much on education and don't have tip-top outcomes. I don't have the answer to that. I think competition is good. I mean, in Lancaster County, though, I'd say far and away, most people would say that LPS provides a pretty good return for what's spent on it. I mean, we have good quality schools and have pretty good outcomes. There's always going to be that rural urban divide. Folks don't want to necessarily give up control of their local school. But the cities also see that, there could be some consolidation out there, and complaining about property taxes, but still keeping your expensive school and that's in a low population area might be why you have expensive taxes. Am I going to have answers to all of this? No. Can we find some solutions if we look for some metrics of success and find some ways maybe to make the education side more efficient? I think there's something there.
Okay. Election security has been a topic lots of folks have been talking about. First of all, do you believe that efforts to investigate Nebraska's 2020 election were warranted? And then do you support changes to our election laws and procedures? And if so, how do you do that without making it more difficult to vote?
I would like to think that we had fairly secure elections this last go around. I think compared to some other states, ours is in pretty good shape. Is there room for improvement? I believe so. Part of the issue is that perception can become reality, I think. And if you have a significant part, not necessarily a majority, but just a significant part of the population that starts to have a real sense of distrust in how things are going, that doesn't end well. We have to have our system has to operate on the consent of the governed. So we have to have faith in that system. One of my campaign issues is voter ID, paper ballots. I think we start with the simple stuff and see if we can create enough confidence in the system that that people feel that their vote really does matter. That's a tough nut to crack. I mean, there's going to have to be a certain amount of computer involvement. There's always going to be some discrepancies. There's no election that's 100% clear and certain. It just never happens, not in a country this size, even with all the electronics that we have. But I would like to push back a bit on that misnomer that people are too uneducated or lack the savvy to have an ID or vote. I mean, most people I know, especially younger people, know how to operate this better than most older people I know. My son can do better on this thing than either you guys or myself. He can fix something in 3 seconds. So him not being able to figure out how to register, I don't necessarily buy that argument. So that's why you have to use you have to use an ID for so many other things. I don't think that voter ID should be a major impediment.
All right. The legislature briefly flirted again with the idea of scrapping nonpartisanship. Do you believe that the legislature ought to be nonpartisan? And if so, how do you make it nonpartisan? Because it's sort of not at times. Or perhaps you believe that, I mean, there are folks who think that the legislature would benefit from just admitting, yes, we're Republicans or we're Democrats. What's your take?
Oh boy, that's a tough one. I mean, I am conflicted about it. I mean, if you saw how things work like they do in DC, where it's just partisan rancor almost, I don't think we want to go there. But it also seems to me that we sort of capitalize sometimes on voters not necessarily knowing much about candidates. For better or worse, people don't take the time or have the resources to go research everyone. So their fallback position sometimes is just to rely on whatever party it is, unless it's a particular position that they really care about. They'll actually go through and research each candidate. I mean, ideally, I think back when we put all this in, it was you're voting not by party, you're voting on the merits of that particular candidate. That's what their goal was. But ironically, I think everyone but the voters seem to know whether someone is Republican or Democrat in the state house. Certainly everyone in Lincoln is involved with the legislature has a pretty good idea which side of the aisle they're on. I mean, at this point, I'm going to go with what the will of the body is. I don't have a strong feeling either way. I'm just going to do the best I can for the folks in Northeast Lincoln. Let's just say if I have to buck from some of my Republican colleagues to get it done, I will. And if we have to find some ways to work with folks on the other side of the aisle, which we almost certainly would, I'll do that. Because the end result is probably really more important.
All right, I have a final question, but Kent always has to ask his questions before I ask the last question. So Kent?
Yeah, I have two pretty standard questions, but I wanted to ask you one. What did you do in the AG's office?
Actually, I started out doing Initiative 300 work.
Oh my!
Cap Dirks wanted someone who had a farm background to go and work on Initiative 300, and then they got busy enough that I started just doing a lot of other civil litigation. Because there's plenty of people that seem to want to sue the state, believe it or not.
Yeah, and sometimes it's us.
That can't be true. Keeps all these lawyers busy.
First question, and you noted McCook. I'm also I grew up in beautiful Southwest Nebraska, and this directly concerns that. What is your thoughts on the canal project proposed to move the South Platte water and also the big lake?
Well, I guess I never mentioned this earlier, but I was on the Lower Platte South NRD for 8 years. I think I actually chaired the water committee for the last 2 or 4 that I was on it. And I don't know if you two remember, gosh, I can't remember if it was 2012 or if it was 2009, but there was a point where we were really short on water. And we were seriously considering Lower Platte North and Papio, how we were going to make sure there was enough water coming down the Elkhorn that summer to keep the well fields going for Omaha and Lincoln. Do you guys remember that?
I do.
Yeah. And they were sitting there talking about having to take irrigated ground in the valleys of the Elkhorn out of production to make sure there was enough water coming down. But this is terrible. We talk about reacting and not being proactive. That was the worst. So I think you know where I'm going on this. Colorado is going to take the water if we don't do something. That's just the way they are. They've done it with the Arkansas River. They'll do it with the South Platte too. I know it's going to cost a lot of money, but my recollection from being back on the NRD is when we start getting to 420, 440 in our population in Lincoln, we're not going to have any more. That's where the well field runs out at our current flow rates. If we don't have those flow rates coming down the Platte because Colorado's taken them, I'm not even sure we're going to make those numbers. So I think it's going to be some pain up front, but I think we need to do it because once those water rights are lost, it's actually going to be a problem both for Lincoln and Omaha as they grow down the future, or grow in the future down the road. I think most of us will be gone, but if we don't do something, the people after us will cuss us for not.
And at that 440, you're going to end up also having to build a new water source, which is a whole other issue. My second question is, as you know, most of the real work in the legislature gets done by committees.
Yep.
Have you given any thought to what committee committees you'd want to be on if you were elected?
I've had several people ask me that. I wouldn't mind being on ag, but I think my constituents would probably want me, I'd say business and labor or judiciary. I mean, what I've had several folks say is that we need to have several of the lawyers on judiciary. I mean, just because of the nature of it. And right now, I don't think there's that many attorneys actually on judiciary.
Boy, I don't know. I don't know the number of attorneys.
Yeah, it's kind of strange how that worked out, but Yes, I'd say those would be the top three, but being a junior senator, you can only get the best that you can get, if you know what I'm saying.
Sure.
All right. The last question I've got for you, Russ, is what have we not asked you that you wish we would have asked you?
Well, I was going to ask in the set of questions on the
voters guide.
Yeah, the voter's guide. You were asking about whether people having access to the legislature and whether it should be available electronically was a good thing or bad thing. I'm kind of paraphrasing. So I guess I think that the system they have now is actually pretty good. I mean, you can access it all the time. You can see the committee meetings. You can see all the senators. You can hear who's testifying and the questions. Is there some issue there that the news media are concerned about, or?
Well, there was there have been discussion at times about limiting our access to the floor, and because the legislature isn't bound by the open meetings and public records laws that they passed for everybody else. There are things that there's access that we have that we just get because people have always given it to us, and those kinds of things can be taken away. Just so you know, the set of questions that we've asked today were formulated by the editorial board. The questions that you were asked for the voters guide came from our political editor and the political reporters. So we sort of don't communicate. We do them independently, but I obviously have read the voters guide, and I've read people's responses, and I think that what we were trying to get at there in part is, are you you want to continue a level of access that we have, and maybe to get at the idea of your thoughts on transparency.
Well, I mean, I think it says it right on the front of the Capitol that the watchfulness of the citizen is what keeps. Well, that's not. I need to look at it again.
The salvation of the state.
Salvation
is
of
the
the state.
watchfulness of the citizen.
Yes, that's it. Thank you, Ken. So if you can't watch them, that's what starts to create distrust and lack doubt in whether your representatives are truly representing you. I think it's almost necessary in this kind of electronic environment. I think there's probably certain situations where they will need to have some horse trading go on behind closed doors, because that's just how legislation happens. But when it's actual testimony, where it's the chance for people to be heard, I think that should absolutely be broadcast, especially in as big a state as ours. I mean, some people can't afford to drive 300 miles just to come watch a committee hearing. So, I mean, the only way that this could be a problem would be as if somehow the news media was inserting themselves and impeding the process. I've never heard of anything like that. Maybe there's some other access issues I'm not aware of, but maybe what you're asking for is some kind of either rules or even statutes that give a little bit more of a guarantee so that you guys continue to have access. Is that part of what you're seeking?
Well, I think there's been a general, the direction the wind has blown in the last few sessions has been to remove things and sort of tighten down on what the public sees and knows. I mean, the thing that pops into my mind is when we dealt in the legislature with preferred candidates for key positions at the university, that ended up being a bill that I testified on that bill. But originally, the university wanted to conduct searches for key positions privately because they said they'll get the best candidates, because people weren't eager to publicly say, yeah, I have a job right now, but I'd really like your job over here, and alienate the people that are employing them. We negotiated, and people were involved in coming up with the idea, okay, we'll have 4 preferred finalists. So winnow it down to a field of 4. The last time this was dealt with, the university wanted to take it down to 1 preferred candidate. The legislature supported that. And, there are other things where, just information that's public, people are interested in making private. Now, some of that's, they don't want their public information out there. They don't want their public information out there, but they want to be able to look up their neighbor's public information. So that's what we're getting at, I think, with that. But you pulled a fast one, Russ, because the question really was about you. Now, I don't mind answering for you, but I don't want to deny you your final chance here on this interview to talk about something, that we didn't hit on. So.
Sure. Well, I mess up this. This is my chance to make a shameless plug for my candidate.
Okay.
So that's what I'll do. All right. Well, we've got a good set of candidates. We've got 4 actually in this district. So the fact that there's this much interest and people wanting to serve at such a high paying rate for this particular position, that's a good thing. That shows a healthy democracy, in my opinion. I'd just like to remind folks that I've been in this district a long time. This is where we've chosen to have our home, raise our family, have our business. That's where we go to church. We are inextricably intertwined in Northeast Lincoln. And honestly, it seems like Northeast Lincoln, I wouldn't say that they get the middlings, but it seems like so much more money and so many more resources devoted to other parts of town. If there's some way that we can help that going forward. For instance, we had a bond issue. I know this is local, but we had a bond issue on repairing our streets. Yet Adams, Fremont, Vine, Holdridge, some of them, it doesn't look like they've improved at all since we did any of that. I don't know what happened to all that money, but Northeast Lincoln, I think, deserves a little better. I have the legal experience. We are invested here, and I think that I would make a great advocate for our part of town in the legislature.
All right. Well, Russ, that seems like a very strong finish. Not quite a shameless plea, just a good, strong finish. So, all right. Well, with that, we will close this. But Russ, again, thanks for making time for us to get this in. And we appreciate you and all the other candidates who are sticking their neck out to run and who want to serve our community, even though sometimes public service looks a little painful these days.
It does look that way, It's what you got to do. Sometimes, though, without trying, nothing's going to change. You just got to give it a shot.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Russ. We appreciate it a ton, and we will see you later.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right. Bye.